Another year has gone by and more Duke Blue Devils are selected in the NBA draft. Dereck Lively II and Dariq Whitehead have found their NBA homes. We talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, and it's so great to have you here with us on this Tuesday, June 27th of 2023. The NBA draft has come and gone, and yet again, the Duke Blue Devils have players selected. Dereck Lively II and Dariq Whitehead find their new NBA homes, and we discuss that throughout today's show. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. Follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_ as Locked On Blue Devils is your daily podcast devoted to everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. Also, make sure you take this opportunity to subscribe to us on YouTube if you're watching the show there each and every day. Again, your support means the absolute world to us here at Locked On Blue Devils. So without further ado, I want to bring on my colleague, my co-host for today's shows and festivities. It's none other than my good pal, Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. Kevin, the time is greatly appreciated. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, JJ. How about you?
I can't complain. Certainly excited to see the draft come and go last week and to now know the update, to now know the landing spots for Dereck Lively II and Dariq Whitehead. I guess we'll get into each of them specifically in just a moment. But first, opening thoughts, Kevin, just your take on another year. And yet again, Duke finds themselves with more first-round draft picks being added to the story.
Well, yeah, I think the surprising thing was that there was only two players that went into the NBA draft. I think typically when you get a heralded freshman class coming in for Duke, you expect anywhere probably between 3 to 5 freshmen, or I should say players, leave for the NBA draft. Even look at last year's team, 3 first-round picks right off the bat, and the number 1 overall pick, and Paolo Banchero, then Mark Williams and A.J. Griffin as well. So this year, only 2 players put their names in. Both got picked in the first round. So adding to the already high-profile stats that this program has at putting players in the NBA.
Yeah, we keep having to track where these players end up. Again, later in the week, we'll see the start of NBA free agency, so a couple of former Blue Devils might have new homes going into next season. But we know early about new homes for 2 guys, the most recent draftees into the NBA, starting with Dereck Lively II. He was selected by the Dallas Mavericks, 12th overall, a lottery pick for D-Live. As you're watching the first 8 to 10 picks kind of unfold, Kevin, what thoughts are you having as we're anticipating Dereck Lively could go at any given moment?
Yeah, well, we talked about on the show last week how some things that I was hearing and reading in mock drafts and everything was that Dereck Lively was being picked as high as number 10 overall to the Dallas Mavericks. And once that trade happened between Oklahoma City and Dallas, the gear started turning that Dallas maybe was going to slide back a couple of picks and take Dereck Lively, and that's exactly what they did. And we'll get into the fit later on, I would imagine, but it seems like it's perfect for Dallas. I mean, this is a team that has really lacked that big defensive anchor and rim presence in the middle, and that's what Dereck Lively is going to bring this franchise, who's really looking to turn things around after what was arguably the most disappointing season in the NBA last year.
The Dallas Mavericks have a really big decision to make and hope that Kyrie Irving returns after acquiring him in a midseason trade a season ago. If that happens, then you've got 2 former Duke players on Dallas with Irving and now Dereck Lively II. But to be drafted in the lottery, credit to what Lively was able to do in his freshman season. So many people really fired up and optimistic about his defensive ability going to the next level, his ability to finish around the rim with those dunks. He's definitely going to be a lob threat on Luka drives, possibly Kyrie drives. And as we do touch on that fit, I think this is a really good landing spot for Dereck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also boils down to the fact that you don't get picked anymore in the NBA draft based on your college stats. I mean, you look at Dereck Lively's stats, certainly don't pop off the page at you. Wasn't a 20-point scorer or 15-point scorer, or even 10-point scorer. But what he did to impact teams and how they had a game plan against Duke's defense, which was one of the best in the country, that was what had him flying up draft boards, his versatility. And let's be frank, this was a player that was the number one prospect in high school coming into college last summer around this time. And around what was it, January or in December, we had conversations. It was like, what's wrong with Dereck Lively? Can he play at this level? And he really turned it on in late January, February, and March. That catapulted him from maybe what a lot of people thought being a multi-year player to being a lottery pick in the matter of about 3 months.
I mean, if you were a big going into the draft, Kevin, is someone like Luka the player that you're hoping to be able to team up with at the next level?
Well, it has to be, especially for a player like Lively, and I think that's why it's such a good fit with Dallas, is because Luka is so ball dominant. Now, obviously, you put Kyrie Irving there. He's very ball dominant, too. Now, that's another issue that Dallas has to sort out that they really didn't have sorted out from the trade deadline on last year. But for Dereck Lively, doesn't command the ball on offense at all, like we saw in his 1 year at Duke. Basically, most of all of his made field goals were dunks. And you're not going to see a big offensive repertoire out of him, especially in his rookie year. So he's there to set screens, to be a big body in the paint, to defend, to block shots. And if Luka or Kyrie lobs one up right near the rim, he'll catch it and flush it home. So I think for especially what Dereck Lively has shown in his skill set so far this year, or this year at Duke, I should say, it's a perfect fit for him.
Super excited for Lively's fit with the Dallas Mavericks. He was yet another lottery pick for the Duke Blue Devils, and we're adding now to lottery picks under head coach Jon Scheyer, which is super exciting. His first lottery selection as the Duke men's basketball head coach. We'll step aside for one quick moment, and Dariq Whitehead found his new NBA home. We'll discuss that coming up here in a moment on Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book that I love so much. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. Individual player props are always so amazing. I've mentioned it before, but growing up in the South, in Braves country, big-time Braves fan, and with the MLB season moving forward, you've got to take a look at some of these Ronald Acuna Jr. player props, one of the front runners to win National League MVP early in the season. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel is an official partner of Major League Baseball. We move forward here with today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. So, Kevin, next up, Dariq Whitehead, drafted by the Brooklyn Nets. And what do you know? Another first-round pick. We were kind of contemplating the range in which he would be drafted. Jay Billis felt pretty confident about the 25 to 30 range. Kevin, where does he ultimately end up going? He's going to the Brooklyn Nets.
Hey, he's going to the Brooklyn Nets, goes in the low 20s. And we talked about in the pre-draft process about these two players and how Dereck Lively, he kind of finds his perfect fit with the Dallas Mavericks in that they don't need him to score the ball and he can play basically right away, given that their relative youth and inexperience on the front line. I think Dariq Whitehead finds himself in a similar perfect situation as well with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, you look at the Brooklyn Nets and basically cleaning house from the James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving half season that they played together. And Brooklyn's a team that is good, that can make the playoffs. But let's be honest, unless something drastic happens in free agency, they're not a championship contender. And I think that's perfect for Dariq Whitehead, where you have your quote-unquote studs in that trade of Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson that Brooklyn got for Kevin Durant. And they're really good pros that Dariq Whitehead can learn for. And I think more importantly, he's not going to feel rushed coming back onto the floor for Brooklyn, at least to start the year. Now, I know the reports are that he's going to be good to go for training camp, and we'll see if those reports are in fact true. He's not going to play in Summer League beginning next week in Vegas, but I think Dariq Whitehead finds himself in a really good spot where he can take his time, he can learn, he can develop, he can get healthy, most importantly. And then once November, December roll around, I think you're going to see the training reels potentially taken off of Dariq Whitehead, and he's going to show the world what he actually really has and what we all saw in his days at Montverde before he committed to Duke.
Yeah, beyond excited to see what Dariq Whitehead can do at the next level, to see if he can combine that shooting ability we saw as a college player for Duke with the ball handling and attacking skills that we saw in his high school days. So for Whitehead to be drafted by Brooklyn, a team in which Kyrie Irving played for a portion of last season, you've got Seth Curry, who's played meaningful games for the Brooklyn Nets in recent years. He's a free agent, so we'll see whether or not he's back and whether we have a couple of Blue Devils they're playing for Brooklyn. But there's also kind of the hometown dynamic with Whitehead's selection. Always fun when you get to see your NBA dreams come true. And not only that, Kevin, you're playing pretty much in your hometown when you're going to be able to have so many friends and families at pretty much every home game.
Yeah, Dariq Whitehead, a Newark, New Jersey native. With traffic, it could take you about 2 hours to get to the Barclays Center. Without traffic, if you're going late night, it could take you about 25 minutes. So that's kind of what happens in this area, in the New York City metropolitan area with rush hour traffic. But yeah, I mean, the Nets were his hometown team. I mean, they used to play in Newark at the Prudential Center. They also used to play in the Izod Center and Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford. So that was kind of his hometown team growing up before they eventually moved to Brooklyn. Now, I got a lot of comments on when I said he's going back home to play basketball in New York City, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it's not playing in New Jersey." Well, New Jersey doesn't have a pro team anymore, and it used to be the Nets. So whether you make your pick of the Knicks or the Nets from New Jersey, that's your kind of hometown team. And I guess Dariq Whitehead will certainly say that the Nets are his hometown team since he's going to be donning that black and white jersey of Brooklyn.
Yeah, and now he gets to play with them, right? Now he gets to start his NBA career. I think of some recent NBA picks that Duke has had that were drafted kind of in the range that Whitehead was drafted, and there's not as much pressure, right? You still have kind of the guaranteed rate that we talked about a week ago. You'd much rather be a first-round pick than the financial drop-off that comes with being a second-round selection. But given that you weren't a lottery pick, there's not as many expectations for Whitehead to produce right away, and really anything that he's able to do is almost a bonus. AJ Griffin was really effective for the Hawks this past season. You know, he was not a lottery pick, but was able to get the job done. So I'm fired up about the opportunity that Whitehead could have at the next level playing there in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and let's be very clear. I mean, his broken foot significantly hurt him at Duke. Now you still look at the three-point shooting numbers at close to 43%, and it's like, how did he do this basically playing on one foot? And also it's worth noting that when you have these way too early mock drafts that come shortly after the year before, so after Paolo Banchero's draft, and you get those way too early 2023 mock drafts, Dariq Whitehead was a projected top 10, in some people's eyes, top 5 pick. I mean, let's make that very clear. I mean, this is one of the most decorated USA high school basketball players that we've ever seen at Montverde Academy under the legendary head coach Kevin Boyle. So Dariq Whitehead, he still has a ton of game, and he slid down the draft because of his broken foot at Duke and his subsequent second surgery he needed on that here in early April. So it's going to be really interesting to see how his career and the trajectory of his career develops, because he certainly has all the tools to be a really big-time player at the NBA.
You're listening and watching Locked On Blue Devils here on this Tuesday. We're recapping the NBA draft, and we'll move forward talking about the NBA and talking about another story relevant to the Duke basketball program. Someone else is heading to the NBA, as there are reports out there that Amile Jefferson is set to be a Boston Celtics assistant coach. Jefferson, of course, played 5 seasons for Duke. He was teammates in his final season with Jason Tatum, who's now the superstar for the Boston Celtics. So after a year of being on staff and as assistant coach for John Shire, Amile Jefferson appears to be heading to the NBA to be a Celtics head coach. I was really surprised by this. I just didn't see something like this on the radar. It felt much later. It is much later than you're used to seeing in those coaching carousel switch-ups. So, Kevin, this one caught me off guard.
Yeah, this caught me off guard a little bit too. But I think you saw the tea leaves, at least from the Boston Celtics, when they got eliminated in the postseason. And obviously they had to throw a makeshift coaching staff basically together once the situation last summer or last fall, even with Ime Udoka. So there was a lot of vacancies coming on their staff. And I didn't really necessarily see Amile Jefferson making that leap from the college game to the NBA game so quickly. You mentioned Jason Tatum. He's very good friends with him. That continues to see the two of them post a lot together on social media. And it is a significant loss for Duke in the sense that he was really taking over, especially Nate James's role when he left to become the head coach at Austin Peay and really coaching up those big men. And you saw the development of Dereck Lively and Kyle Filipowski in the post this season, Ryan Young as well. And he was also turning into a pretty good recruiter. He was the lead man in Isaiah Evans, the 5-star that Duke has in the class of 2024. So it's going to be a significant loss for Duke. I got a couple of questions. Does this affect recruiting? And in the large sense, no, because still your top dog is Jon Scheyer, who was the best recruiter in the country, who still is, but was under Mike Krzyzewski's staff. And I also got questions like, would players on the current roster leave because of this? And absolutely not. That's just not going to happen. I mean, they're already there, and Duke has basically put out its roster already in the last day or so. So no, that's not going to happen, but it still is a significant loss for this Duke program.
As a player, Amile Jefferson, of course, won the national championship with Duke back in 2015, 39 games played that season, averaging 6.1 points and 5.8 rebounds per game. And again, played 5 seasons for Duke, a very, very experienced Duke basketball player and someone that will always be a part of the brotherhood. No questions asked there, but a really cool opportunity for him to go to the NBA. And so, as most coaches would say, we wish him nothing but the best and excited to see what he can do next. Now the question becomes, what about the open spot on the bench, Kevin? That's something that a lot of people are trying to ponder. This past season, Duke, of course, had another man on the bench in the special assistant to the head coach role, occupied by Mike Schrage, who was the Elon Phoenix head men's basketball coach for a number of years. He seems like a likely candidate to slide over into one of those assistant coaching jobs, but you have to wonder if it could be someone else. I mean, Jon Scheyer always keeps us on our toes when we're waiting to find out who could fill that spot.
Well, yeah, and actually that's not the name that's really going around right now. It looks like he's going to stay as the special assistant to the head coach. And you heard this name being floated around before the news of Amile Jefferson that he might join the coaching staff in some capacity, and that's former Duke guard William Avery. And now it seems like there's a spot open for him to be an assistant coach, and he could join the staff as that replacement for Amile Jefferson. So there's been nothing official yet, but that's kind of the popular name that everyone's floating around right now, that William Avery is going to join the staff. And it's pretty funny how things come full circle. I mean, he just got his degree from Duke this past May, finally went back to school and completed his degree. So he's officially a Duke alumni, officially a Duke graduate, and now he might be sticking around Durham a little bit longer and joining the basketball staff.
And had such a great career playing for the Duke basketball team. William Avery, of course, as you mentioned, a name out there to possibly be the newest assistant coach for the Duke Blue Devils. So many people really care about the fact that most of the assistants did play for the Brotherhood as well and are now in those assistant coaching spots. Does that still matter to you, Kevin, or what do you think about this hire? Is it important to replace a former Duke player with a former Duke player?
I don't necessarily think that. I know a lot of people get caught up in that because basically Mike Krzyzewski had his staff filled with former players. I think the one really exception that sticks out is Mike Bray. But Jon Scheyer, he kind of dismissed that right from the get-go when he brought in Jai Lucas. I mean, brought him over for Kentucky. He wasn't a Duke player. He really had no other affiliation to Duke, and he joined the staff. So I don't think it's a necessity anymore that somebody has to be a former Duke player to join the coaching staff. But certainly it always helps to have those former players around who can relate to the players and give them their experiences when they were in the big moments, when they were in the spotlight, when they were under scrutiny, and just to have that relationship with the current players is certainly a bonus.
let's talk about, first we need this news to become official, right? We need to figure out who this assistant coach will be, and we can kind of deep dive into what that role could be like in terms of developing the players on the current roster. But just a quick rundown once again to refresh people's memories on William Avery's Duke career. A 2-year career for the Blue Devils, a 6'2" point guard who averaged 15 points a game on the 99 team that won 32 games, 32 straight games, making it all the way to the title game before losing the national championship to UConn. And then following that game, Elton Brand, William Avery, and Corey Maggette became some of the first players to leave Duke and to leave Coach Mike Krzyzewski before ever graduating. So an all ACC selection back in his playing days, only played 2 years of college ball, which to your point is why it took him a little bit longer to be able to finish that Duke degree. But man, he was a pretty special player for the Blue Devils right there at the turn of the century. Yeah,
really good player. And again, people talk about that Duke team as one of the best not to win a national championship. And talking with some people around that team and around that program, it's like that loss still haunts them. That they didn't win that game and win that national championship. Like that's one of those losses that if you're a Duke fan, Duke player, support staff, yada, 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 et cetera, like that one is always going to sting deep down inside, no matter how many days and weeks and months and years and decades pass on. So let's wait and see. Let's wait and see who takes on this new assistant coach spot for Jon Scheyer on his staff moving forward. Kevin, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the podcast with us. Once again, you are the site expert for Ball Durham. BallDurham.com is a great website to visit. Tell us a little bit about it as you exit. Yeah, so we're full up right now on players on campus, getting you some measurements, some jersey numbers, obviously a ton of recruiting going on this time of year. So we're all on top of that. We'll be on top of Summer League with Dereck Lively. It's not just rookies that are in Summer League. You'll see Jack White. You'll see Wendell Moore, Theo John. You'll get a lot of Duke players out in Summer League. So when that gets underway at the beginning of July, we'll be all over that as well. So come read us at balldurham.com and follow us on Twitter at @ball_Durham. Kevin, you're the best. We'll talk to you next week, okay? Thanks, JJ. All right, that's our pal Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham, joining us here on the program today. And that's going to do it for our show today. Super exciting stuff, talking everything you need to know about the NBA draft, and Amile Jefferson set to take on a new coaching role leaving Duke University. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.